There are two main sources of revenue for the WHO. One are what's called assessed contributions, which are essentially membership fees paid by the 194 countries that are members of the WHO. And that amount is decided based on the population and wealth of the country involved. But assessed contributions only account for less than a fifth of the WHO's funding. More than 3/4 of its funding comes from voluntary contributions. That's from governments, from charitable foundations, from companies in some cases that are directed towards global healthcare efforts and public health efforts that are run by the organisation. The US is the biggest contributor in the last 2-year budget cycle for the WHO. It accounted for around 15% of its funding, $893 million it contributed over those 2 years. Again, the majority of that money being in a voluntary contribution, its assessed contribution, its membership fee is only around $240 million. The number 2 contributor to the WHO was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which funded around 9% of its operations over those 2 years, around $530 million. And following that, you have the UK at around 8%, the Gavi Vaccines Alliance at just under 7%, and Germany at just over 5%. China, by contrast, only contributed around 1.5% of the WHO's funding over the last 2 years, a sum of $86 million. Now, the US had already planned to reduce its assessed contribution in the current year. It was going to cut that in half to about $58 million, but what President Trump is announcing now is a much larger cut to voluntary contributions, which is a much bigger revenue hit to the WHO.
So, as you said there, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a big contributor, and Bill Gates has called Trump's decision or described his move as dangerous. What sort of damage will this move do to the organisation?
15% blows a massive hole in the WHO's budget at a time that it's already struggling to fund itself. Now, the US money over the past 2 years has gone into programs like polio eradication, access to health and nutrition, and also vaccines for preventative diseases. So those programs will be running short of money if the US suspends its funding, as it's announced it will do. The WHO did secure a small increase in its membership fees for the current budget cycle. That's for this year and next year. But as you've been saying, Bill Gates, the second biggest contributor through his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, saying that this is as dangerous as it sounds to cut funding by this amount. The WHO has already been appealing for extra money to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's looking to raise $685 million. It's actually already secured a donation from the United States of almost $15 million towards that effort. That money's already been paid in. But of course, if they don't get the voluntary contributions to the order of around $400 million it was expecting this year, that will make things very difficult for the organisation over the course of the next 2 years.